Well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to start by making sure that everyone is aware of the disappointing decision that came down from the nation's highest court yesterday, allowing the Trump administration to end the 2020 census 2 weeks early. In the words of dissenting Justice Sonia Sotomayor, the harms caused by rushing this year's census count are irreparable. In normal times, the census is a monumental undertaking, and the pandemic has brought countless new challenges. The consequences of this decision will reverberate for at least the next 10 years. So to every Illinoisan who is watching and listening, here's what you can do. The new census count ends tomorrow. The time to fill it out, if you haven't already, is right now. The time to encourage your friends and neighbors to get counted is right now. Pick up your phone and go to my2020census.gov or call 1-844-330-2020. It takes less than 10 minutes. Make your voice heard by getting counted. And now for today's COVID-19 update briefing. I'll kick us off with a little good news. Illinois is now averaging more than 60,000 tests a day for the last 7 days, meaning we test more than 3 times as much as the average state in the United States. And the vast majority of test results are being returned within an actionable period of time. Unfortunately, all 11 regions have seen an increase in positivity compared to where we were at last week's update. Statewide, our positivity rate has grown by more than 1 full percentage point in the last week alone. And in most regions, COVID-like hospital admissions have increased in the same period of time. To date, Illinois has had relative success in keeping this virus at bay, and we're still doing better than many of our neighbors, but we can't let up. And these numbers are indicating a concerning direction. That's particularly true in Region 5, Southern Illinois, which surpassed 8% positivity on average, up from 5.8% just 2 weeks ago. Today, the rolling average there is down to 7.7%, but it gets back up above 8 and stays there. If it does, Region 5 will face stricter mitigations across the board. I want to reiterate the message that IDPH and I have repeatedly given to local health departments and to local officials. Pay close attention to your community's metrics and have the courage to take action when the local data indicates a problem. I have one simple thing to say to everyone in areas with rising positivity: mask up. It will make a tremendous difference in keeping infections down. Currently, we have 1 region sitting above IDPH's 8% threshold for resurgence mitigations, meaning the state has stepped in to reduce community spread. That's Region 1, home to Rockford, Dixon, and Galena, and it entered tightened mitigations on Saturday, October 3rd, and has continued to see positivity rates climb at a consistent pace, now up to a rolling average of 10.1%. Hospital admissions 2 weeks straight of growth. To the residents of Region 1, we're rooting for you. Each of you have a direct role in making a change to bring your numbers down. Region 4 and Region 7 have demonstrated that it is possible to bring down that positivity rate with the tools that we know work, and they're within your power. Wear a mask, keep some physical distance, and encourage those who flout public health guidance to act with consideration for the entire community. With that in mind, I want to take a moment today to discuss the imminent holiday season. Preparations for Halloween and Dia de los Muertos have already begun. Diwali starts 1 month from now, and before you know it, it'll be Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa, and New Year's. It's a flurry of some of the biggest traditional family gatherings in a multitude of cultures, by and large representing one of the busiest travel times of the year. Family gatherings, celebratory vacations, travel, all phrases that have taken on a new meaning and a new sense of concern in a way we never expected a year ago. But just as was true for Easter and Eid and the 4th of July, this virus doesn't make exceptions for traditions. Yesterday, the CDC director reiterated a concern that epidemiologists have been expressing for weeks now. Small family gatherings are one of the most prevalent ways that the virus is being transmitted. He expressed his concern, the director did, so that families will take special precautions as they make Thanksgiving plans. There is no free pass in this season of giving when it comes to COVID-19. When confronted with decisions about the upcoming holiday season, many people who have erred on the side of caution up to now might face new temptation to let their guard down. Well, let me be blunt. This virus isn't taking a holiday. It only wants to find new hosts. And if you think it's okay to let your guard down because some people seem fine after they got COVID-19, I'll remind you that many young people in their 20s and 30s and 40s are experiencing long hauler symptoms of this virus: pulmonary issues, months-long breathing and coughing issues, exhaustion. Even for healthy young people, that's not a walk in the park, so don't treat it like one. The safest thing you can do simply is to take precautions. Dr. Ezike and I want to be with our families and friends during this holiday season too. We're all human beings, and we all want to see and spend time with our loved ones whom we've spent the better part of a year worrying about. So today, IDPH is releasing guidance and recommendations from medical experts on how to have Thanksgiving and other holidays safely. The recommendations cover subjects like travel considerations, overnight guests, holiday shopping, and celebratory meals. I've asked Dr. Ezike to outline some of that guidance for you today. So, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Ezike.
Thank you, Governor. So, as the Governor mentioned, planning for our fall and winter holiday celebrations this year will take a little bit of extra creativity and extra precautions, but definitely advanced planning. The safest way to celebrate with the members of your household is to connect with people outside of your household virtually. But I know, we all know, that many people will be gathering and getting together with family and friends. So I'd like to provide some tips on how we can do that a little bit more safely. First of all, if you're traveling, if you have to get to the location, think about how you will travel. Whether you're traveling by plane, recognize that there are lines in security in the airport terminals, and try to observe the 6 feet of distance. Remember that there may not be the potential to have the 6 feet of distance on the plane. Traveling on buses, traveling on trains, that can also involve sitting within 6 feet of others for any length of time. Traveling by car might mean that you have to make stops for gas, for food, bathroom breaks. All of these forms of travel can be made safer if you use your mask and continue to wash your hands. So now, if you're actually hosting a holiday gathering, try to have as many activities outdoors as the weather will permit. Limit the number of people. Be reasonable when you're thinking of the planning in terms of how many people you can safely accommodate. Remember to increase air circulation indoors by opening windows as much as possible. Remember, if people are coming to your home from out of town, or you yourself will be going out of town, try to see if you can limit your exposures in the preceding 2 weeks. The fewer exposures people have, the lower the likelihood of catching the infection. When it comes to shopping, whether it's for food, for that special host gift, whether it's other kinds of gifts, consider going to stores at off-peak times that won't be as crowded. Or better yet, don't forget the option to order online. or call your local store and then drive up and pick it up. Browse websites for local stores to shop for gifts. Again, when you're planning that special meal, think about the seating arrangement. First of all, you're thinking about how many people you can safely arrange in your home, and see if you can keep members of the same household together and separate other households. You could even try using smaller tables, or even spread out the celebration over multiple rooms in the house. When serving food, think about how that will be done, whether it'll be buffet style. You might want to remind everyone, if it's going to be buffet style, that the utensils that are now being shared, that everyone wash their hands before eating. Otherwise, think of having the food already plated and given to your guests. Try to limit the number of people that might go into a smaller area, like into the kitchen. We all want to be around our family and friends during the holidays, but if you are sick, please understand that you need to stay home. Don't assume that your symptoms are not serious. Don't assume that they aren't COVID. Don't assume that you're not contagious. Take the better decision, and if you are sick, please stay home. We don't want to have our holidays marred by tragedy on the back end. We want to stop this spread of COVID. Since yesterday, 2,862 new cases were identified and 49 additional lives lost. In Illinois, a total of 327,605 cases have been reported to IDPH, and now 9,074 deaths as our total. 1,974 people were reported in the hospital overnight with COVID-19. Of those, 390 were in the ICU and 153 were on ventilators. In the last 24 hours, 52,669 lab tests were reported, for a total of 6,463,923 total tests. Starting tomorrow, IDPH will begin reporting on our website both molecular and antigen tests, both of which are diagnostic tests to diagnose COVID-19. Neither of these are the antibody tests, which represent previous infection. Antibody tests are not going to be included in the count and have not been included in any previous counts. Until now, the numbers you see every day, like today's reporting of 52,669, has only reflected the molecular tests. Antigen tests thus far have comprised less than 1% of all tests performed to date. But with more rapid antigen tests being deployed to the states from the federal government and other sources, and an updated national case definition that says a person that tests positive with an antigen test counts as a probable case, we will see the number of antigen tests increase. Also, another adjustment, we are going to be redoing how we calculate data for Region 6, East Central Illinois, to more accurately represent the spread across the region. Champaign County and its data will continue to be included in Region 6. What will be removed is the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign saliva testing. That will be broken out separately. This will allow us to better identify testing needs and trends in that region. And finally, as always, wash up, back up, i.e. maintain your distance, mask up, and sleeve up as a reminder to get your flu shot. Thank you. And now the comments in Spanish. Planeando para los días festivos este año, requerirá un poco de creatividad y algunas precauciones adicionales. La forma más segura de celebrar es con miembros de su casa y conectarse virtualmente con otros. Pero sabemos que para muchos las fiestas se tratan de familiares y amigos. Por eso queremos compartir algunos consejos sobre cómo celebrar de manera más segura. Si planeas viajar largas distancias, piensa en cómo viajarás con seguridad. Si vas en avión, reconozca que habrá filas de seguridad y en las terminales de aeropuerto hay posibilidad de no poder distanciar en el vuelo si está lleno. Viajar en autobuses y trenes puede implicar estar sentado a 6 pies de distancia de otras personas durante cualquier periodo de tiempo. Y viajar en automóvil podría significar paradas en el camino para tomar gasolina, comer o ir al baño. Si está organizando una reunión navideña, trata de tener tantas actividades al aire libre como lo permita el clima. Limitar el número de personas y intente aumentar la circulación de aire en el interior, abriendo un par de ventanas. Cuando van de compras, si sea para comida, para esa gran cena o para regalos, intente ir en horas de menor actividad. O mejor, vea si puede ordenar por internet. Para cualquier cena que tengas, piense en la posición de los asientos. Mantenga a los miembros de la misma casa juntos y trata de poner espacio entre una familia y otra familia. Cuando sirva comida, evite la propagación con estilo buffet y considere que una persona sirva toda la comida para que varias personas no manipulen los utensilios para servir. También trata de limitar la cantidad de personas que entran y salen de las áreas donde se prepara la comida, como la cocina o el comedor. Todos queremos estar con familiares y amigos durante esos días, pero si está enfermo, por favor, quédase en casa. No crea que sus síntomas no son tan graves y que está bien irse. Queremos detener la propagación de COVID-19. Desde ayer se han reportado 2.862 nuevos casos de COVID-19 y se han perdido 49 vidas adicionales. Se han notificado aquí en Illinois al DPH más de 327,000 casos, incluyendo más de 9,000 muertes. 1,974 personas en Illinois pasaron la noche en el hospital con COVID-19. De ellos, 390 pacientes estaban en la unidad de cuidados intensivos y 153 personas estaban en ventiladores. En las últimas 24 horas, más de 52,000 pruebas de COVID-19 fueron hechas. Comenzada mañana, IDPH informa sobre pruebas moleculares y de antígenos. Hasta ahora solo se informaban pruebas moleculares. Las pruebas de antígenos representaban menos de 1% del total de pruebas realizadas. Pero con más pruebas de antígenos rápidas y una definición de casa nacional actualizada que dice que una persona solo necesita una prueba de antígeno positiva para ser considerada un caso probable, anticipamos ver un aumento en el número de pruebas de antígenos. Además, hoy estamos ajustando cómo se informan los datos de la región 6, centro-oeste de Illinois. El condado de Champaign y sus datos seguirán estando incluidos en región 6, pero las pruebas de saliva de la Universidad de Illinois Urbana-Champaign serán separados. Esto nos permitirá identificar mejor las necesidades y tendencias de prueba en la región. Y finalmente, como siempre, por favor, recuerde ahorita los 3 M's. Manos, lávense las manos, mantenga su distancia y máscaras. Usa máscaras todo el tiempo. Muchísimas gracias. And with that, I will turn it over to Governor Pritzker for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Ezike. Happy to take any questions from members of the media. Yep, Marianne.
Can you talk about this saliva test and whether or not you're able to spread it yet to other schools, and why pull it out of that region? Are the numbers going to be skewed then? Are we going to see something different with that taken out of that region for U of I?
Let me take the second part of that first. The numbers are being skewed, as you know, by the mass testing that's going on, I mean, twice a week for everybody on that campus. We think that's a terrific thing, by the way, that what they're doing, and so, you know, more power to them. And we do want to spread it across the state as much as we can, and certainly to the other schools across the state first. But the IDPH determined that it would be better to measure the region by taking those and putting them aside as we're measuring whether mitigations will be necessary in the totality of that region, putting apart just the campus of UIUC. And so that's, you know, their call, but I think it's probably a good one, and it allows us to better measure, allows the doctors to better measure how things are really going in that entire region. In terms of spreading the saliva test across other campuses, the University of Illinois continues to work on getting the CLIA certified labs up and running in other locations, right, sort of bridging, so to speak, to make sure that the other campuses have the ability to run those tests, because you need to run them in proximity with where you're actually gathering the saliva specimens. And so that's why it's not just something you can go gather somewhere and drive them around the state to get them tested. We actually want them to happen on the campuses or near the campuses around the state where we can get those saliva tests run.
Is it FDA approved, the saliva tests?
So it's been authorized. The saliva test is in fact encouraged by the CDC and the FDA. When Dr. Birx was here and I met with her directly, she was encouraging us to use those labs for exactly the saliva test. So they are accurate tests. They are, saliva tests are being used all across the country as a way to measure. And so the University of Illinois has developed their own unique version of that. And so they're running those tests, and those are very helpful and effective. Yeah.
Let's talk about the graduated income tax, and it does seem to be quite a war going on. What do you make of your own cousin not agreeing with you?
Well, I don't know if you have a cousin and whether you agree with your cousin on everything, but you know, let's just be clear. The fair tax is about making the system fairer for the middle class and for people who are striving to get to the middle class, and asking the wealthiest people in the state to pay a little bit more. So that's why I'm fighting for it.
But can you make a promise right now that you will not tax retirement income?
I always have. I've said that, and I'd be happy to repeat that. I've said that for years now, that it would be inappropriate. You know who hasn't said that and has said the opposite? People who are advocating their side, that is, the vote no side of the fair tax. They put out a plan that includes taxing retirement income as well as raising taxes across the board on everybody in the state, including the people who can least afford it.
Governor,
Yeah.
well, yes, for fairness, spent more than $10,000 to promote a fake tweet by Liz Uline. You feel it's dishonest for an organization that you're funding to promote a fake tweet, and would you have taken down the advertising immediately after the account?
Well, I think we all know that people who are supporting the Vote No campaign are essentially working against the middle class and working against people who can least afford to pay the taxes that people on the other side would like them to pay for them, by the way. And so, you know, that's why I'm on the other side. I think that we ought to be fighting for working class families, for working families all across the state. It's why I've been a significant supporter of the Vote Yes campaign.
And what do you, it really is heating up. It's the issue on the ballot here. Those who do not agree say that it's giving Springfield politicians more taxing powers. It does seem to resonate with folks. Are you concerned that this tax is going to go down and not the way you want it to? And then what?
Look, they can tell all the lies that they want, unfortunately. I just don't think that people will believe them, because it's not true. There's no new taxing power, right? The idea here is to make it fairer. The existing ability for the General Assembly to do, you know, to raise revenue or to keep revenues the same or to decrease revenues in the state, that doesn't change. What does change is whether or not you can ask the wealthiest people in the state to pay a higher rate than those who are middle class and working class. And that's what changes. That's the only thing that changes that's on the ballot.
The World Health Organization came out a few days ago and said lockdowns don't work. The CDC just released a report saying, excuse me, 85% of COVID patients always or often wore masks, 70.6% wore masks religiously. So how can you explain and justify what we're doing here in Illinois?
Well, actually, we followed exactly what the head of the WHO recommended, which is that you use those early months when you don't know anything about a new pandemic as the moment in which you want to put a stay-at-home order in place and then figure out how you're going to move forward so that people don't get infected and go into the hospital and go onto a ventilator and die, or at least to try to diminish it, and figure out how you're going to treat people as well as prevent them from getting worse. So we've done exactly that. I mean, you've seen that we've moved from an original stay-at-home order to a Restore Illinois order that's moved us along in terms of reopening things. We're in a masking campaign now, right? You've seen the ads on television. I've been up here every day, or at least I was every day, now virtually every day, talking about everybody needs to wear a mask, everybody needs to socially distance. We're doing everything that we can to try to prevent more people from getting COVID, and I think the WHO, in fact, there was a fact check on that that determined that precisely what I'm saying is precisely what this the WHO director said.
Dr. Ezike, can I ask you a couple questions? And one about the holiday testing, and I have a different one. I know people are looking for direction, and I do think that you're offering a little guidance, but it's still pretty vague. Are you saying to people, just keep your families apart over the holidays, don't get together? Because you're not really telling people how many or what you should do.
Well, I can't really know the layout of people's homes to be able to tell them how many people they can fit in their homes safely, right? So,
Well, what would be a good number?
well, we already know that if you're not in a mitigated region, there should be no gathering over 50, right? So we already know that. But I don't know if people can fit most people can fit 50 in their homes safely while separating families that are together. I think we have to get used to the idea of, even in our home, wearing masks. As unnatural as that may feel, I was just talking with someone who was identified as positive yesterday, and so there's one child in the family that's positive, but there's a parent, there's a mother, there's a father, there's another sibling. We don't know of those other 3 people who's incubating, who's already positive. Like, they all have to be on quarantine now. I said, start masking now. Maybe 1 of you will only get it. Maybe 0 of you. If you mask now, you could try to affect the eventuality of having all 4 people have it. So there's a lot that we can do. And so the masking, whether it's part of the holiday celebration, whether it's when you have 1 person in the household infected, there are things we can do. But for me to say, have only 8 people at Thanksgiving, you might have a giant space where you could do more. So I don't think I can be much more prescriptive than that, but imploring people to use their best judgment, to discuss and plan ahead of time. Let people know ahead of time that we're going to be using masks. Bring your masks. Because if you're not eating or drinking just to keep everybody safe, that's the best way to go forward. We have too many personal celebrations that have ended in tragedy, where people have gotten sick. I know of a party, there were 20 guests. 10 people ended up positive. 1 person is already hospitalized now. There are funerals that have ended up in additional funerals. Like, that's not the goal of any of these events. And so if this is what I can share to try to decrease that, that's what I'm sharing.
Can I ask you as well about sports? There's so many wondering. I know we've talked about it 100 times, but I need to ask you one more time. And what role, if any, are you playing in whether there will be winter sports, especially basketball? Will they play with masks? And there are those raising questions because your daughter plays basketball. I just have to ask you, what's the latest on winter sports and especially basketball?
Yes, so we will have all that information released very shortly. I know many people are waiting on that information, so we can't tarry or delay, because decisions have to be made and people need to govern themselves accordingly. So more to come. As soon as we have the information to share with you, that will be put out.
Well, then why was basketball a medium risk sport when lacrosse is a high risk sport? What's the science and data behind that?
I think we followed the National Federation of High School Sports Association. I think it lined up. I didn't go through each one and try to find reclassifications. I'm hoping that they all stayed consistent with the National Federation High School Sports Association's guidelines.
Okay. If I may, I'm sorry, do you want to, Dr. Ezike? Go ahead. If you want to.
Dr. Ezike, just while you're up there, actually,
Sure.
I've got several questions from other reporters as well. statewide death data for the first 9 months of this year show that there have been more than 12,000 excess deaths this year. Roughly 3,500 were not classified as COVID-related. What does that tell you about the deadly side effects of this pandemic and what the state is actually doing about it?
No, that's a great question. So we have looked internally. I've discussed with the governor these numbers as they appeared month over month in terms of excess deaths. For anyone who might not understand, is the average number of deaths that we usually had in a time period compared to previous years. And so when we looked at 2018 and 2019, averaged what the deaths were month to month, and then we looked at what we were seeing in 2020, this year of COVID, if you will, we could see that there were significantly more deaths than before. And so again, you can postulate that these are all unintended consequences of COVID, but they are. So some of them will be COVID deaths that were not diagnosed when we didn't have the robust testing. Some of them will be people who may have had, because of the devastation of this really traumatic event that we're going to, have had overdoses. We know that overdoses have increased. Some of it may have been people not seeking care because they were scared of COVID. So it's a conglomerate of all of those things that have caused the deaths to be much higher than they have been in previous years.
Why aren't we counting COVID antibody tests or positive COVID antibody tests? Because wouldn't that give us a real positivity rate?
Right. So we are just separating out diagnostic tests. That is what, I mean, I don't have a problem with sharing antibody numbers. We have the CDC and other entities that are trying to calculate what the antibody positivity rates are for our state, for various other states, so that we can get an idea of maybe, you know, again, not knowing exactly how long the antibodies stay, they may be a partial picture of the situation, but we don't know if the antibodies will wane and such that maybe it's an underestimate. But we the more data, the better, right? The more data, the better. But that is not a diagnostic test, and so sticking with the diagnostic test just for consistency, that's what we'll be reporting now. I don't have a problem with later sharing what some of the antibody results show for our state. Again, there's no data that we're trying to hide. Thank you.
Dr. Zika, and I'm not sure if this is part of what you were just asked, but the USA Today article that talks about there were more outbreaks than really what we had been reported. Why not report what happened at Great Lakes and other prisons and jails? Why are we now hearing about this? This is a USA Today story. Why not report the specific locations of more outbreaks?
So we obviously keep track of outbreak data. We have an ORS outbreak reporting system where that information is listed. So we are looking at outbreaks. We are, assembling all of that data to see where our outbreaks have been. Over the long haul, we know that correctional facilities and other congregate care settings, like long-term care settings, have been hard hit. But I will highlight that for our long-term care settings, our nursing homes, while the deaths have increased over the last 4 weeks, which is not a good sign at all, we have seen the number of deaths in nursing homes decrease. So we are taking care of our seniors and trying to keep them as safe as possible. But again, the rest of the population continues to be at risk, and we need to keep masking so that we can keep our cases down, which eventually will bring down our hospitalizations and our deaths.
If you look at the Cook County Medical Examiner's report, there's 2 people who committed suicide. They put them down as a COVID death. There's a person who got in a scooter accident. They were labeled as a COVID death. That's why some people are having a hard time grasping these numbers, because it just doesn't seem to be accurate. Yes,
and so I have looked at that, and I share that concern. And so when we have looked at all the deaths that have occurred, unfortunately there were over 9,074, we have looked at which of those were related to an accident, which of them were obviously not proximately related to the COVID. And as I think I've shared that before, that it was less than 6% of those deaths were in that category where it was an accident or homicide, something where the COVID diagnosis was not the proximal cause of death. So yes, there are some other that are included, but those are not the 99.9% of the cases of the deaths that we've had.
All right, we'll take one more.
Governor, have you met with any of the high school athletes who wanted to meet with you? I know they have met in the state of Washington. The governor there has decided decided not to let sports happen. What about meeting with the athletes who really want to talk to you?
Well, I have talked to people who are concerned about this. They're the adults engaged here, and I, you know, and I am deeply concerned. I mean, honestly, COVID has interfered with so many things that are normal in our lives, right? And so I am obviously concerned to try to bring back or to expand the ability for people to participate in the things that they normally do. And that's why even as they're looking at high school sports for the winter, I know that they're contemplating, how best to bring things back and make sure that more sports rather than less could be allowed. But that is a medical decision, just to be clear. It is not, should not be a political decision. It should be a decision that's made by people who understand better than any politician how this virus spreads and how it can spread and among young people. Indeed, I was on a call last night with a number of, or yesterday, with a number of governors from around the country, both parties. And to the person, they have experienced outbreaks in high school sports or that have been caused by high school sports. And that's something that they're all looking at how to deal with when they've already allowed it. And it's a concern, obviously, for all of us to make sure that not only the kids, but all of their families and the teachers are kept safe.
Governor, can I just ask you about this, sir, before you go?
I'm sorry.
Several people have been asking, speaking about the governors. Since the militia cases targeting these Democratic governors in Virginia and Michigan, do you feel more at risk for yourself and for your family? And have you ever, is there any record of any kind of militia threatening you or reaching out to you or anything like that?
I'm not aware of anything related to this recent revelation around Governor Whitmer and Governor Northam, if that's what you're asking. Thank you very much.
Do you feel more at risk at all?
One time, we can have control of our